I thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to thank you for your flexibility and for changing the order of the presentations. Well, I am a teacher of English at the School of the Blind in Budapest, and also I lead the choir there, and I'm a member of Disability Studies doctoral workshop at Eötvös Lóránd University. And well, my main research area is music and disability studies. And surprisingly, I would like to talk about music in disability studies and inclusion. Well, today I would like to talk about 4 things: 2 ancient concepts, music, disability, which are linked to 2 new disciplines. Music and disabilities are present or have been present since the very beginnings of times. These are ancient phenomena. And disability studies is a very young discipline, which was born at in the second half of the 20th century. And there is music in disability studies, which is even younger, which was developed in the 21st century. So that's, I think we can say that, a really young and fresh discipline. Well, first, I would like to say a few words about disabilities, then about disability studies, broadening the things to music in disability studies. And I would like to clarify how definitions and all these theories can be turned into practice. And then I would like to talk about 2 courses held at the Liszt Academy of Music and at the University of Berkeley in California. And finally, I would like to talk about inclusive practices and some words about relevance of music and disability studies in higher education, more exactly in music teacher education. Now, let's start with disability, which is a concept which was born in the 19th century. The word disability hints that something is missing, either physically, psychically, mentally, or legally. Says Goodley in 2011. The opposite of disability is perfection, states Hernadi in 2014. Disability is a pervasive and permanent aspect of the human condition. What does that mean? That most of us have been, are now, or as we age, will be a person with disabilities. Disability may at first appear inescapably, solidly real, medically, scientifically, biologically verifiable defect in mind or body. But despite its undeniable material reality, disability is also shaped and given meaning by culture. Attitudes towards disability vary with time and place, and so does the lived reality of disability, says Joseph Strauss in his book Extraordinary Measures in 2011. In other words, and to put it a little bit more simple, disability is a social contract which is interpreted in different ways, in different times, and in different cultures. And also, we can say that every human being is permanently or can be temporarily disabled at some point in their lives. What do I mean? I mean, if we just break our legs or have a minor accident, we are unable to do something, something which we always do in everyday life. So temporarily, we are disabled. And let's say, who is a disabled person? People with disability down through the ages have generally been seen as objects of scorn or pity, or cases to be cured or managed, problems to be confronted or ignored. This statement comes from Pelka in the 21st century, more exactly in 2012. Disabled people have always been spoken about or spoken for, but rarely listened to, states sadly Shirley in 2005. We can see that this has nothing to do with inclusion, and these definitions show a kind of inferiority, a kind of being subjugated. Now, disability studies completely changes this oppressive attitude, because it looks at people with disabilities and disability itself from a completely different aspect. So how and what is this new discipline? So disability studies examines the policies and practices of all societies to understand the social rather than the physical or psychological determinants of the experience of disability. Disability studies has been developed to disentangle impairment from the myths, ideology, and stigma that influence the social interaction and social policy. The scholarship challenges the idea that economic and social statuses and the assigned roles of people with disabilities are the inevitable outcomes of their condition. Disability studies understand their subject matter as social, cultural, and political phenomenon. Again, by Goodley in 2011. So disability studies is, we can say, the academic voice of people with disabilities, which critically reflects the happenings and events of the world and reacts to the world. For example, it reacts to accessibility and inclusion actions and the lack of actions. So what is now music in disability studies? This is, as I have said, a relatively new area, a relatively new discipline, mainly practiced in the United States, and only a few scholars research it in Europe. This is a very fresh and, I guess, very exciting part of cultural disability studies. What does it do? What does it examine? First of all, it examines how disability appears in music and what is the connection between disability and music. And it focuses on performing disability. Now, what do I mean? For example, how in different musical pieces disability is present and how. For example, in Giuseppe Verdi's Don Carlo, there is the Grand Inquisitor, who is a blind guy, a blind man. Why is he blind? Because in a letter, Giuseppe Verdi wrote that I should like this man to be blind. Or there is another example, Tchaikovsky's opera Yolanta, where there is a young blind girl who does not know that she's blind, and you know all this miracle happens, and she's cured, and of course the prince comes, and the young princess is healed, and they just fall in love, and of course happy marriage is the result of their romance, we can say. The other branch, the other direction is performing with a disability. Now, what is this? It is when we speak about different composers and artists who are disabled. Everybody knows, and it is a well-known fact, that Beethoven was deaf in his adult life and later. But fewer people know that Smetana was also deaf at his later years. But fewer people know that Joaquin Rodrigo was blind throughout his life. Or again, just a few people know that Paul Wittgenstein was the person for whom Maurice Ravel wrote his piano concerto for the left hand, because Wittgenstein had only one arm because he lost his right arm in the First World War. And even fewer people knew about Géza Zichy, a Hungarian nobleman from the 19th century, who also had one hand because he lost the other in a hunting accident. But again, many people know about Andrea Bocelli, the Italian tenor, or Evelyn Glennie, the British or Scottish percussionist. Again, a lot of people know about Thomas Quasthoff, the baritone, but we have to be very, very cautious, and we have to know that all these people had to fight their battles, not only with their disabilities, but only with the society, because it was not obvious that they can continue or even start their musical careers. For example, Evelyn Glennie, who is world famous now, or Thomas Quasthoff alike, were not admitted to music higher education because of their disabilities. They had to fight, they had to struggle, and they surely had very bad times and severe frustration. But many disabled people had to give up their musical careers because they did not have opportunities, or because their teachers were not prepared to teach disabled musicians. Acknowledged disabled composers and artists are role models for young disabled musicians, and teachers have to be prepared and open to discover these role models of the future. As I have experienced, they are open. And now I would like to say a few words about two courses. I had the wonderful opportunity to lecture on music and disability studies at the Liszt Academy of Music in Budapest. The audience were experienced music teachers who were in the middle of their teaching career. What was the course about? First of all, the history of disability and the history of disabled composers and disabled artists and disabled characters in operas, and disability memoir in music, which is a really new thing to talk about. This is when a composer writes about his own life, his own disability in a piece, in a musical piece. For example, we can mention here Smetana's first string quartet. And the other topic of the course was a research of my PhD dissertation, in which I interviewed blind music students and their teachers, music teachers, of course, and they were asked about their views on learning and teaching music to disabled, in that case, rather blind musicians. And how was the course received? Let me just quote a few opinions. I asked feedback anonymously, and one says, much less complicated issue than I thought. The other says, we need to know, but we don't need to fear. And the third one, I wish we had heard about disabilities and the relation between music and disabilities at the university. There was another course, and I can say that I was really lucky and really fortunate at the University of California, Berkeley, at the Department of Anthropology. That course was open for students from all over the university. Of course, the material was adapted to that mixed audience. We focused on music and disability studies and European aspects of disability and music, and on Hungarian disability culture and Hungarian blind orchestra and a Hungarian blind choir. And this leads us to inclusive practices. A blind orchestra and a blind choir, why are they so important? Because it meant blind pride and blind identity. And last but not least, social responsibility and being seen, which is very helpful when we want society to know about values of blind people, values of disabled people. So this culture and musical culture and blind orchestra and blind choir roots in the 200 years of education of blind people in Hungary. And let me say something which might be a little bit strange. I think that special schools are as inclusive as some mainstream schools should be. What do I mean? Presently, I lead a choir, a mixed ability choir at the primary and vocational school of the blind. It means that the members of the choir are primary school students, vocational school students, some of their teachers, sighted and blind alike, and some blind adults who share responsibilities in different things. If a member is sighted or partially sighted, their responsibility is to lead the people on stage. If someone, and there are quite a number of them, have absolute pitch, they give the starting pitch, and every song we perform, every choir song we perform has a responsible person who start that particular piece. It is well known that more and more primary and secondary school age children are mainstreamed nowadays. This tendency strongly influences higher education. In what sense? First, higher education has to prepare primary and secondary school teachers to receive disabled children. Second, universities have to prepare to receive disabled students coming from those secondary schools. The List Academy course reactions and the feedback are in line with my PhD research results, according to which the participants find it necessary to introduce disability-related courses into music teacher education in order to facilitate their teaching practice when they meet students with various disabilities. Participants think that one of the most effective ways to help students to overcome their fear or inconvenience towards disabilities and people with disabilities is to assist would-be music teachers to gain a deeper insight into different ways of perceiving the world. Participants are convinced that lectures on the connections of music and disabilities could be held either by disabled lecturers, researchers, or teachers who are experienced in teaching music to disabled students. I would like to conclude this with a quote from an acknowledged professor at the Academy of Music who says, if there were classes and courses on music and disabilities, it would be easier for both students and teachers. Thank you very much for your kind attention.